So here we've got some examples that I want to go through with you. So let's assume, hypothetically, that you have $60,000 in student loan debt when you've graduated. You've chosen to pay over 10 years, which is the standard fixed repayment plan, and your interest rate for this debt is 5.5%. Now, you don't have any down payment because, well, that's not how student loan debt works. It's not like a house or a car. But this math, by the way, would work in case you were dealing with a mortgage or a car payment or something like that. The math is the same. It's just the knobs that are going to change a little bit. And let's say that your first payment date is January 1st of 2021. Well, if we put all that into the machine, that means then that your monthly payment every month for the next 10 years is going to be $651.16. Now, how does that work? It's a really complicated formula, and you don't need to worry about it. Just trust me that it works. But what this also means then is that in addition to having repaid the $60,000 you borrowed, you'll also have repaid an extra $18,139 in interest over the life of the loan. Because remember, student loans aren't free. Now let me show you how this works. So that first payment on the 1st of January 2021, you'll make a payment of $651.16. Now every payment you make is going to be some principal and some interest. Let's see how much. So if my debt is $60,000 and my annual interest rate is 5.5%, well, my monthly interest rate is just that 5.5 divided by 12, or 0.458%. So the interest I pay in month 1 is 0.458% times $60,000, or $275 even. The additional amount, everything I'm paying that's not interest, is principal. So remember when I told you before about the idea that it's kind of like a fight and you're trying to get ahead of the amount the interest is growing? That's what we're doing. The difference, the over-under, so to speak, that $376.16, goes to reduce the amount that I owe. So now after month 1, I don't owe $60,000 anymore. I owe a little less, $376 less to be exact. So then let's look what happens in month 2. Now what's going to happen is instead of me paying $275 in interest, well, I'm applying the same interest rate, that same 0.458%, but now I'm applying it to a smaller balance. That's why my interest goes down by about $1.50. Because my interest amount goes down, the amount of principal I've paid off goes up. So my debt shrinks more in month 2 than it did in month 1. The same thing is going to be true in month 3, month 4, month 5, and we can keep going down for 10 years. You see, every month my interest amount shrinks until eventually I get to 10 years out in the future, and I've got basically no interest. I'm paying $3 in interest on my last payment because my principal is so small. Now, that does not mean that's the end of the story. You see, like I said, there's a lot of knobs on this machine that we can turn to make things better for us or easier for us, or maybe both. So let's say that you look at this and you think to yourself, wow, that's a lot of money to be paying every month. I'm just out of college. Maybe I can't scare up $650 a month. Well, there's several things you can do to make things a little bit easier on yourself in the short term. The first is to increase the length of your loan. Now, this is going to come with some downsides as well. Let me show you. So if I increase the term to 20 years, what's going to happen? I want you to watch what happens to my required monthly payment and also what happens to the total amount of interest I've paid over the life of the loan. You ready? See what happened? My payments didn't get quite cut in half. I'm saving money every month. Yes, I am. But I've more than doubled the total amount of interest I'm going to pay. And here's why. If I take a look at that first payment, because interest now represents a much bigger slice of the pie, my principal doesn't get shrunk so quickly. And what that means then is that interest is very persistent. It means, in other words, because I'm paying more slowly, the interest doesn't shrink as quickly. And that's why I end up paying more than twice the total amount of interest. So if you need to extend your term, if you say to yourself that 10 years, well, that means the payment is too high, that's okay. Again, you do what you got to do. I don't know your situation. But I do know for a fact that if you increase the length of your term and you don't do anything else, it means that while your monthly payment is going to shrink, It also means the total amount of interest you paid is going to grow. But what else can we do? Well, there's a couple other things that you can choose to do now. One thing you can do is to borrow less. I think a lot of students just assume that whatever they borrowed is what they have to. But the thing is, if you can get away with borrowing a little less, say maybe you go for a scholarship. That's free money. Go for a grant. Go for a work study. See, if I reduce this debt by just $5,000, that saves me about $50 a month. Saves me thousands in interest. If I start off from a position of advantage, then I'm better off later on. There's one more thing that you can do, though. You can reduce your interest rate. Now, you can't just go out and say, I'd like less interest, please. But here's what you can do. You can be aggressive about searching for refinancing. So what is refinancing? Well, imagine that I'm your loan servicer. I'm Sally Mae, I'm Navient, I'm whoever. And I am charging you 5.5%. You find somebody else. That other person says, hey, they'll pay me your debt, then you pay them. But instead of you paying them 5.5%, maybe you pay them 3 3/4. Let's see what happens if we reduce the interest rate to 3.75%. That's not even 2 percentage points. On an exam, that's nothing. You wouldn't even argue over that, right? But let's see the magic. Let's watch what happens. I save myself, again, about $50 a month and thousands of dollars in interest. Why? Because this interest rate is essentially the speed at which your debt grows. If you can slow that down, then every dollar you put in does more damage. It means you get away with paying less over the life of the loan. So how do you do this? Well, one thing you can do is increase your credit score. The better your credit, the more likely it is that another servicer is going to come and say to you, hey, maybe you can pay me a little less every month. How do you do that? You get yourself a credit card. You start now building up a credit history, so when it comes time to apply for this, to apply for refinancing, you have a reputation. There are other things we can do as well. Let's ignore this. Let's say that you're like, well, I'm actually doing pretty well right now, so maybe I want to pay a little bit more and get this done with more quickly. You've got two options there. The first is to decrease your term. So let's say that you want to cut the term in half. Instead of extending the term, paying less in the moment but paying more over time, what if I want to do the opposite? What if I want to cut the term, pay hard now, and be done sooner? Watch what happens. My payment has gone up. Yes, now it's over $1,100, but the amount of interest I've paid is cut in half. More than half. In other words, there's less than half left. The problem with this is that now I have to come up with $1,146 every month. And maybe I'm not ready to say that that's a guarantee. But what can I do? I can choose to pay more. I can say, hey, in months when times are good and I've got some free cash, let me send that to my student loan servicer. Let me see if I can pay a little bit more. Watch what happens if I pay off just another $100 every month. Not a huge amount in the grand scheme of things, but watch what happens. Now, I'm done a year and 8 months sooner, and I've saved several $1,000s in interest. And what's great about making these optional extra payments is that first word is that they're optional. It's that I can choose to start and stop at any time. You have options. I don't know your situation. I don't know if $60,000 is how much you borrowed, if that's too small, if that's too large. I don't know. I don't know what kind of interest rate you'll qualify for. I don't know what kind of support you have. But what I want you to know is that being fearful and keeping all this stuff kind of under the rug, so to speak, is the biggest sin you can commit. I want you to approach your student loans fearlessly. I want you to understand how this works. I want you to advocate for yourself. I want you to understand that once you know how the machine works, you know how to turn it to your advantage. Whether that means reducing payments now so that you get a little breathing room, or whether it means attacking your loans aggressively so that you're free of them more quickly. Because remember, student loans don't get discharged in bankruptcy. So this is something that basically, come hell or high water, you're going to have to deal with. I want you to deal with it intelligently, fearlessly, and with confidence. So good luck to you.